On Monday, things quickly went from a game the Cardinals didn't deserve to win to one that we can't believe they lost. What do we make of the struggles for Lars Nootbaar, Ryan Helsley, and why was Ryan Vilade in this game? That's all coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Monday evening, June 9th, 2025. The Cardinals fall in extras to the Blue Jays as they open up that series at Busch Stadium on Monday night. 5-4. Cardinals lose a game that if you watch the first 7 innings or so, 8 innings or so, really the first 7.5 innings before you get to the bottom of the 8th inning, you just didn't really feel like this was one the Cardinals deserved to get. Jose Barrios was better. He found a way to neutralize this Cardinals lineup. Once again, I mean, he's been a pretty good performer against St. Louis over the years, and this was a game in which he did it again. Cardinals couldn't do anything off of him. But he only pitched 6 2/3 innings. And when the 8th inning rolled around, despite the fact that the top of the 8th saw the Blue Jays extend their lead on a home run robbery that Victor Scott nearly had, but I think in the end he might have helped it over the wall. Couldn't quite see a camera angle that definitively showed that, whether it was going to hit off the top of the wall or would have been over regardless. But it was hit on a line, and he was just making his way back trying to track it and just couldn't get the feet positioned in time to get a clean leap at it, and unfortunately tumbles onto the lawn there to make it 3-0. But the Cardinals battling back in the 8th inning once they got Barrios out of the game. This went from a game the Cardinals had no business winning to one that we can't believe they didn't win it. You know, it was a stinger. I don't know about worst loss of the year necessarily, but certainly you hate to see the way those final innings unfolded as the Cardinals, after putting up 4 runs in the 8th, Ivan Herrera with a missile out to left for a 3-run homer to give the Cards a 4-3 lead. Ryan Helsley blows the save, and then after Phil Maton gives up a lead double to put the Blue Jays on top. He did escape the rest of that jam. Was bases loaded, 1 out. He found a way to get out of it, only allowing 1 run and setting up the Cardinals for, I thought, a very good chance to at least tie the game. With Victor Scott II, the ghost man on second base to begin the 10th inning, it's set up very favorably. 1, 2, and 3 coming up in the order. Cardinals couldn't get anything done. So we'll talk about some key takeaways from this game, and hopefully we'll paint a picture of the game that we saw. I'm going with a little bit of a more regimented style. I've got 5 talking points. I'll rank them number 5 up to number 1 of things that I think are worth talking about from this game, and I want to make sure to get to all 5 of them. So we'll do that after I remind you that B-Schaeff Daily is a daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast. If you like Cardinals content on the everyday basis, make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube or follow the podcast B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify. So that's how I'm going to do tonight. We'll see. I don't know if this is something that maybe I'll do more often. You can let me know what you think of it. But just as a way to organize my thoughts, I'm going number 5 up to number 1. Not necessarily concern level, because they're not all bad things. There will be a few negatives that we'll be talking about. But notable topics, starting at number 5. Unfortunately, Ivan Herrera's home run is reduced to, I think, the 5th most notable topic from this game, because it should have been the game winner. It should have been a 4-3 win. You should find a way to get through. And if you didn't find a way to get through in the 9th, like Helsley giving up the home run, maybe in the 10th inning they should have found a way to be able to tack on and still make that Ivan Herrera home run relevant, meaningful. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it wasn't. But my goodness, is Ivan Herrera a heck of a hitter. Has obviously been trailing off a little bit since the OPS is now dipped below 1,000, but he was at like 1,300. It just was not a sustainable place to live. But he's at 965 now for the OPS. He was 2 for 4 with obviously the 3-run homer, 3 RBIs tonight. He's still hitting 322. He is a very, very good hitter. And unfortunately, his home run was not enough to get the Cardinals the win. But I wanted to make sure we gave him his props. But let's advance to number 4, Andre Pallante. I want to talk about his outing because for me, he was just fine tonight. 6 innings, 3 runs. That's great. That's all you should expect from a back end of your rotation type of guy. But I know that everybody sees the early innings go the way that they do, where Palante gives up a run in the first, gives up a run in the second. He's getting hit around a little bit. hard contact, some soft contact, but it's finding holes, mixing in with some harder contact, and it could be frustrating to watch because it felt like, oh, here we go again. But Andre Pallante settled in. 6 innings, 2 runs. Yeah, he gave up 7 hits. He's pitched to contact. He's going to be. This is a Blue Jays lineup that doesn't strike out a ton. And so he's even more, I think, in a challenging space to be able to get swing and miss in a game like this because they don't really do it very often. Only walked 1 batter, 7 hits over 6 innings, limited the damage to a couple of runs in the first and second inning. He had 2 outs in the first inning, and then things started to snowball on him a little bit there. Just a bunch of hits in a row, and they only ended up getting 1 run out of it. Could have been much worse. I feel pretty good, honestly, about what the Cardinals saw from Andre Pallante tonight. I think the frustration with Pallante is it's been more recent that he struggled. Had that outing where he gave up 7 runs. It's the first time he gave up more than 4 all season. And 4 is not just this pinnacle of a number to strive for, but he's not been, I think, as bad as maybe people give him credit for. And this was supposed to be a season of runway. And we talk a lot about what the runway looks like for Gorman and for Jordan Walker and for Matthew Liberatore getting to join the rotation. I think it should be applicable to a guy like Palante as well, where when you look at everybody else in the rotation, it's Sonny. Well, he could be traded after this year. Who knows? You look at Miles Michaelis, final year of a contract. Eric Fetty, final year of a contract. Obviously, Steven Matz has made some starts, final year of a contract. For a guy like Palante, he could mix into next year's rotation and make it so you've got hopefully Liberatore, hopefully Palante. Like, you start to look then at the prospects. Okay, McGreevy, Quinn Matthews. Like, suddenly a rotation begins to form. But I think you got to let Andre Pallante pitch through a little bit of some stuff at a certain point to be able to make that determination about the future. And I still consider it valuable to do that. So we saw a very good version of Palante in 2024 after he rejoined the rotation in late May. I believe he pitched to like a 3.6, 3.7 or so ERA as a starter the whole rest of the season that year. And now he's running into a bit of trouble. His sinker has not been as effective. It's something that is obviously going to have to rectify, to be fixed. But I also look at it and think, yeah, he's had some moments where he hasn't looked as sharp, and he's also had some games where he's done more than enough to keep the Cardinals in it, and that's been the majority of his games. Like I said, there's been one game where he's allowed more than 4 runs, whether earned or unearned. It's only happened once. There's been 4 times or so, 3-4 times where he's given up exactly 4, and like that's not on the higher end of pitching, but it keeps you in games to an extent, especially because he generally, outside of like 1 or 2 of those games, tends to go deeper into starts. And he's had a handful or more of starts that he's done a perfectly adequate job. 7 innings, 2 runs, 7 innings in a third, 2 runs, 5 2/3, 3 runs, 7 shutout innings. Like, he's had some good mixed in with the bad. He's got to be better, certainly, than what he was against the Royals, but he was that tonight, and so I don't have any issue with Andre Pallante's outing. I think a lot of it comes on the heels of, okay, Micah McGreevy's option to Memphis. It's an outrage. No, it's exactly what we kind of expected to happen. I said I would have held through with the 6-man rotation, even with the off day, but I acknowledge that a reason that they might not do it is you don't probably want to go 7 days between Sonny Gray starts, not the way that he's pitching lately. So it's one of those where they also are worried about the bullpen thing. I think that's mostly overblown because unless you have somebody really get shelled and go 3-4 innings, and the bullpen starts to really feel it as a result of having to cover, you can always option guys and keep churning the Memphis shuttle as they did today, bringing up Riley O'Brien, who pitched a couple of innings tonight, and Chris Roycroft got called up as well. So, you know, we've seen that, and I feel as though they don't tend to use the 8th reliever anyway. Matt Swanson was optioned out along with McGreevy to make room for those 2 pitchers. So we'll see if that changes. But having all hands on deck and available is probably a fine enough move. I would have liked to have seen McGreevy 6 days from now and just said, hey, when you have that June 16th off day, you just let it ride, and everybody gets an even additional day of rest. I think there are guys in the rotation who could use it. I think Pallante could use it. I think he benefited from having an extra day before Monday night start. I think Liberatore certainly could use it after I was concerned he was going to be on the IL after the way he departed the last outing. So, I don't know. You definitely don't want to have to wait any longer for Sonny Gray because he's starting to look like himself and vintage version of himself. So I get it from that perspective. But I'm not eager to, swap out McGreevy for Pallante. I think Pallante is actually a very similar pitcher to McGreevy in a lot of ways. They're both going to pitch to contact. There'll be some sneaky swing and miss when they can get it, but it's not predominantly the way that they're going to have the majority of their successes. McGreevy and Pallante are not all that different as pitchers, in my opinion. I'm not saying their repertoires are identical, but just makeup wise, the way that I view them, looking to attack, I think there could be some similarities there. So McGreevy doesn't walk. I think he's mastered the notion of attacking. I mean, for him to not walk Dodgers yesterday and on Sunday and give up as many hits as he did, but still find a way to get through 6 innings, giving up the 4, like, he's coming at you. And I think Andre Pallante could maybe benefit a little bit more from that at times, but I also think at times he's strategic when he does walk guys. Sometimes it's not the case. Don't want to give him credit where it's maybe not due. 1 walk tonight, though, was all it was for Palante. He gave up 7 hits and has to find a way to scatter those. That's part of his game, but I think you give him runway. I think you allow him to pitch through some of that, especially with the schedule dictating that might be better to go for a 6-man rotation again in a couple of weeks as it is. But I thought Pallante was perfectly adequate tonight, if not even a little bit better than that. Number 3 on my top 5 things to talk about, top 5 list, I should say, of things to talk about tonight. Ryan Vilade. We got to talk about this Ryan Vilade stuff. He comes in against a left-hander in the 7th inning for Nolan Gorman. I believe it was the 7th inning. Gorman had been looking pretty good at the plate, but that lefty against Little, who is a lefty, just would not have gone well for Nolan Gorman. It would have been like the Soto at bat. I think Gregory Soto that he faced the other week. You just knew he had no chance. I have no problem with Ollie pinch hitting for the DH in that spot. I think that's honestly, and we've talked about this before, it's kind of why he's batting 8th, because you figure there's going to be a pinch hit spot later in the game, and then instead of it being left to end your lineup, it's now left. You get that same aspect. So that's something that I think Ollie anticipated, even in terms of the makeup of his lineup today. But Ryan Vilade being the guy you go to righty off your bench, is either a problem with the roster or it's a problem with the decision itself. And I can kind of contextualize why I think it happened. We did the STL Sports Central post-game show. I was on there tonight with Ethan Hannaford, and Ethan was in the Cardinal clubhouse. I was at home. But once he was able to get out of the clubhouse and join me on the postgame, I asked him, hey, did anybody ask about Ryan Vilade tonight? And nobody did, which makes sense because there were a lot of other things that happened in this game. But I bumped it up to number 3 on this list because of how much social media was talking about it. And so I want to give you my take. Like, I'm always going to be genuine with what I think about something or how I view it, or whether, I'm not often critical, people would probably say. And so I get accused of being a homer or this and that. But I'll criticize a decision when I feel it's appropriate to do so. But I'll even still, in so doing, if I say, hey, I would have made a different decision, I'll still try to contextualize why I think the manager made that decision. If we didn't hear it from him himself, which we did not post-game, I'll still try to give you why I think it happened. Like I said, totally no problem with pinch hitting. That's what I think the right thing to do is. Gorman doesn't have a chance against that lefty. Now, you could say, well, later in the game, it may come to that that spot comes up again. Wouldn't you want to have Gorman in there? He's been swinging a pretty good bat. Yeah, possibly so, and it might not be against the lefty that time, so you may wish you had him. But you're down 2-0. You're looking for the spot right there to maybe have a better alignment and get something going in that inning. Granted, is Ryan Vilade going to do it? Probably not. So is it maybe like, hey, this is another data point to see Ryan Vilade before we inevitably DFA him? And it's like, well, if that's how you already feel about the guy, then why are you giving him the runway? It doesn't matter if you've already decided you're DFAing him. I don't think the Cardinals had decided that, but I think it was one of those cases where the guy's up because Walker is hurt. Walker is coming back very soon. Let's decide about this player that we've invested some time into by bringing him in. We saw him a lot in spring. He had a whole AAA runway of a couple of months where the numbers were good, had an OPS above 800. Talking about Ryan Vilade. And then they bring him in. He's been playing a ton because the Cardinals have been facing all of a sudden all these left-handed starters on the other side. And so for a while, I think he faced 3 of them in a row. And then Kershaw Sunday, they were like, okay, enough with the Vilade. We're going to start Burleson against Kershaw. And it went well. Burleson took some good ABs. You like to see that. Burleson is earning himself additional opportunity. Tonight, you're against Barrios, who is a right-hander, so Valade was not going to be in this lineup. But, okay, here's a spot. All right, let's get one more look at Valade. We're down 2-0 anyway. Let's just see if he can come through in this spot, because if he doesn't, it's probably like, all right, we kind of have seen what we need to see. They wanted to see it, then they've seen it. Well, it looked the way that we thought it would look, because I just don't know if he's got the, people kind of throw out that accusation, a quadruple A player. That might be the case that we're dealing with here. But the Cardinals also don't necessarily need to keep housing him in Memphis if they're not going to, I'm trying to figure out the way to phrase this. If there's no room in your heart to see down the line this year that, hey, Valade could help you at the big league level, then at a certain point it's like, all right, Nathan Church was called up from AA to AAA. That's an outfielder that's going to be now playing if and when Valade gets back to Memphis. That's a spot that, Valade's not going to be in that spot. Matt Koperniak is a guy that, has lesser numbers than Valade for sure this year offensively, but also I think the Cardinals have been invested in him and is somebody that, they might want to stick with and see what it looks like for a little bit longer. You can think about Chase Davis at AA. He's going to be a AAA at some point, you hope. Down the line, Joshua Baez a little bit further down the line. And so, you've got a lot of outfielders at the AAA level to where a guy who's 26, 27 years old, Ryan Vilade, kind of a journeyman type, has shown what he would have to show at Memphis to get an opportunity, got the opportunity, and then the Cardinals are sprinkling him into these games, and he's 1 for 30 or whatever it is. And so it's like, all right, we've seen it. We've seen enough. Now we know. Maybe for a lot of people, the now we know probably could have come before tonight. And I say 1 for 30. His 1 for... The people in the comments section always maybe go a little bit heavy-handed. They said he's 1 for 30. I'm like, there's no way he's batted 30 times. But he's 1 for 15 because 1 for 13 after tonight, I believe is the correct number. And he's done that with 5 strikeouts. So, 7th inning, I didn't have a huge issue with it, but I was definitely kind of scratching my head going, all right, Joel Pozo could have bat in that spot. I would have no issue with that. He's your right-handed bat off the bench. He's the guy that stayed when Luke and Baker went down, so he needs to be, you got to be willing to use him in that role, in my opinion. I do not care about the 3 catchers. You've got plenty of catchers. Herrera started the game. Pages ended up coming out to catch for the 9th inning. Even if you had already burned Pozo for that pinch hit at bat, he would not have had to have left the game because it was actually the DH that he would have been pinch hitting for. Same with what happened to Valade. So you could have, in a real pinch, even if you had brought in Pages and then he got hurt, Pozo would have been able to be pulled from DH to catch. There is no issue with how many catchers they have unless you're using that third catcher like it's an emergency catcher instead of maybe your best right-handed bat off the bench. They can be flexible with the roster. Pozo, I think, would have been the better spot. Just he's a better hitter, better bat-to-ball guy. You would have rather seen him there in the 7th. You would have rather seen him in the 9th. 100%. Like I said, as to the reason why Ollie maybe went the other way is, hey, we're kind of looking at this player because it's coming to decision time on his role with the organization. I think after tonight, I would be like, they might not send him down tomorrow, but I would go ahead and do it now. I would call up Jose Fermin. I would call up anybody because you could get to the end of this season and you could miss the playoffs by a game. And I'm not saying having Fermin or anybody else, they don't have right-handed hitting outfielders. This was true last year. It's why Jordan Walker had to come up just to basically be a bench bat for a little while, even though he kind of had reverse splits anyway, wasn't a great fit for that role. They didn't have anybody better for it, that they were willing to basically tank his development for a couple weeks just to have him sit around for spots that he wasn't even well suited to perform in. It was a nightmarish roster construction issue last year that falls squarely on the front office of last year's team. Now, you still kind of have it. It's why they brought a guy like Ryan Vilade in, I would assume, in the offseason, because you're looking for something like that. But I don't know if he's got the juice. The big league level, it certainly seems right now, 1 for 13, 5 strikeouts, to me, does not have the juice. So you've kind of seen it, is where I would come down on that issue. But that's the reason that it happens. You could call up somebody else. People would say Sajaci, and you move Donovan to the outfield. That's fine, but he's not playing every day. Like the Valade spot is not going to be an everyday circumstance. It was tonight, though, and this was a game the Cardinals could have won. And I don't think Fermin in that spot, Jose Barrero, you could have done. Even Pozo maybe probably doesn't change the outcome of this game, but there would have been 2 at-bats that I think you'd had a better chance of getting somebody up there who could do a little something than Valade. I see what you see with Valade, but I always try to contextualize, like, why did this happen? I was told was not asked about it post-game. Probably would not have been the time for the plays because obviously probably some frustration just about the way that went down because the Cardinals should have won this game as it turned out, but didn't. So that's my Valade thought. Yeah, I see what you see. I think maybe, if nothing else, it's a cry for help. I tweeted that, and people maybe misunderstood. In so much as, hey, if this guy's on my roster, Mo, this is the spot that he gets used for. Get me another right-handed bat if you don't want this one coming up in these key spots. But Ollie wouldn't do that to the extent of, like, hold the game hostage because he wants to win the game. So it's not that he was doing that knowing it would fail. I don't think he would have made that decision. But ultimately, Valade looked rough at the plate tonight. So it is what it is. We'll see if there's a roster move on him at some point soon. Number 2 on the list we got to talk about is Lars Nootbaar. Does he keep the lineup spot? That was a big topic of conversation post-game. 0 for 5, 2 strikeouts, and I thought a really, really, really brutal strikeout in the 10th inning. Because Phil Maton, yeah, he gave up the double, gave up the lead in the top of the 10th, but he pulled a little mini Houdini out of his hat, getting the ground ball to third for the double play to keep it a 5-4 game. And then you get Victor Scott on second base. That is a dream opportunity with the top of the order coming up. And for Nootbaar to not be able to put a ball in play, not only that, but to strike out in the way that he did, if you're going to strike out, make it competitive. It was a non-competitive at bat. Took a pitch that he easily could have. I say easily. That's not the way that I want to speak about Major League Baseball. Nothing's easy about this. But he took a pitch for a strike that I think, if nothing else, you can roll over on that and move the runner over. People in the Twitter comments were saying he should have bunted. I don't feel that way because bunting is almost never the answer, especially when you are trying to win the game in the bottom of the 10th. Tying the game, yes, it extends it, but you've already burned your closer. You've burned your secondary closer with Maton. You're in this long stretch of games. You're not playing for the tie there. Like, if you bunt with Nootbaar, you're giving Nootbaar up and hoping to tie. That's like the best case scenario is to tie. Obviously, you could hit a home run. Anything could happen. But you don't play for the tie there. No, you don't bunt. That's silly. All due respect, a lot of people were talking about it. No, it's ridiculous. I'm not bunting in that spot. Nootbaar has like 3 bunt sacrifices in his 5-year career. None since April of 2024. No. Not a chance. But he's got to put that ball in play. He's got to take a more competitive at-bat than he did. And you look up, his strikeout rate is surging. He's 0 for 5 tonight with 2 Ks. He's hitting 237. He's got a 720 OPS. All of a sudden, you got Wynn, Donovan, Contreras is at 733 on the OPS. He's above him. Obviously, Herrera is above him. Burleson is above him. It's one of the lower OPSs in the lineup. Should he be batting leadoff anymore? It's a fair question. I don't think we'll see Oliver Marmol overreact or panic push in terms of a lineup shift. But you could do some different things. Could switch and have Donovan be the leadoff man. He was 1 for 5 tonight. Still hitting 314. Still doing a nice job. Could bump Wynn up to leadoff and Donovan up to number 2. And maybe Nootbaar slides down around number 5 or so. You go Contreras 3, Herrera 4, Nootbaar 5. Could see that with Arenado 6 and then Burleson on down. I wouldn't have any problem with that. And I actually would do it. I would do it because I don't believe in this notion of, well, the lineup spot matters so much that we can't possibly change it unless there's just a glaring reason to do so. I would actually be proactive, but I'm also not the manager of the team. Ollie Marmol has a much better idea of, hey, if I do this, does it rock the boat? Or is everybody kind of like, whatever, it's the lineup, it's fine. I think there's an element of, yeah, maybe rocks the boat a little bit. And there might be a point of pride for Nootbaar to be a leadoff hitter. And look, we've talked about that with Arenado in the past. He always wanted to be cleanup, and at a certain point, you're not performing like a cleanup. You don't get to stay there, and that's just the business of it. But with Nootbaar, it would be the same thing. He might feel a certain way about being removed if he's been very successful at it, but more recently we're seeing a slide. But the slide has really only been 3-4 games or so. Early June, he was getting multi-hit games and was doing fine. So I probably, as I talk through it and realize that like there are human implications to this, a comfort factor, You roll out Nootbaar, Wynn, Donovan, Contreras, Herrera, almost no matter what. Handedness of the other pitcher doesn't really matter. Those are your guys. The top of the order is pretty static. And Arenado is going to regularly be your number 6. I think there's an element of that can benefit the Cardinals. You just got to see Newt with a little bit better plate discipline than what he's had. He's a guy who sees the zone really well, and right now he's struggling and probably pressing a bit. Does moving him down in the order negate that and he stops pressing, or does it kind of compile on itself? Ollie knows that better than I do about where Nootbaar is at. So I don't have a huge issue with not moving him. It's just something to talk about because that 10th inning, you can't strand Vic there. You got to find a way to get that run home with the 1-2-3 coming up in the lineup. So that was my take on Nootbaar. But obviously the number one topic to talk about tonight, Ryan Helsley. Concern level, yeah, it's there. There's a concern level. 3 consecutive blown saves. He's blown 5 on the season. That's already more than he blew all last year. And it was a 97.8 mile per hour fastball right down the pipe to Jonathan Clase. That is a guy that doesn't hit for power and he doesn't hit fastballs. So he had to be sitting dead red on that and was rewarded in the 9th inning. Cardinals really could have used a 4-3 win tonight. Does Helsley get removed from the closer role? No, absolutely not. If there's an injury, great. He's on the IL. Not great, but that would be a reason to say, okay, you make a move. Talked with Ethan Hannaford after the game on the STL Sports Central postgame show. And his indication from what Ollie said postgame, no, that's not even a consideration. I get that that's frustrating maybe for Cardinals fans because you look at his numbers and he's got a 3.80 ERA instead of or 3.75 instead of down in the 2s like we're used to seeing it from last year. Yeah, it's part of the deal, and the Cardinals are going to sink or swim with Ryan Helsley. I think that is going to be the way that they approach this. I don't have a problem with it. I don't look at it and say, well, who's the obvious other closer? You could throw Maton, you could throw Matz, you could throw Leahy. No, I think you're going to continue to see the way that this plays out it's going to be with Helsley at the back of the bullpen. And that's what I would do as well. I wouldn't be doing anything overly reactionary. Helsley, I thought Saturday actually looked really sharp. Gave up a couple hits, obviously, which is what allowed a run to score, but had 3 strikeouts. The stuff was moving good. He's just got to figure out the fastball stuff and get confidence in it. As long as he's healthy with the arm and there's no issue there, I think it's just a matter of getting comfortable and getting confident, and he'll be back. Is he going to be what he was last year? Maybe not. It might already be too late to be that because, like I said, he's already blown more saves than he did last year. But I think Ryan Helsley is going to be okay in the long run. Timing of it's important, though, because if you get toward the trade deadline and the Cardinals do start to falter, do you consider moving him? And if you do consider it, is there any point if the value ultimately isn't there because he's got an ERA of 3.8 or 4? If that ends up happening, obviously a different conversation. But let me know in the comments below what you guys are thinking about Ryan Helsley. I know that there's some harsh stuff out there. Just remind you, relievers can be fickle. There can be ups and downs, ebbs and flows. Ryan Helsley's done a lot of really good for this organization. I don't think we're anything close to what the end of his rope would look like. So let's everybody take a breath. It doesn't look great. When you go into the 9th inning, do you anticipate that it might not go smoothly? Yeah, that's reasonable as a fan, but I don't think it's going to mean the manager makes any changes or does anything differently. So that's my current thought on Helsley. Maybe not what you wanted to hear, but it is what I think is most relevant. And then just one other thing. He had a strikeout of B-Schaeff, where B-Schaeff was in the on-deck circle. I have never seen that, where a guy backs out. I didn't put his hand up. I didn't see audibly that he said anything to call time, but I guess he thought he was getting time, and he wasn't. And the pitch was a little bit low, but if I'm an umpire and a guy backs out like that thinking I granted him time and I didn't, and it's a borderline pitch, it's a strike 3 every time. I'm ringing that dude up. What the hell do you think you're doing? Back it out of the box. I don't know what the explanation was for that, but it was very funny to watch. All right, those are all my thoughts on tonight's Cardinals game. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. We don't have it down on the farm tonight because there's no minor league action on Mondays throughout the season. But we did find out Tekoa Roby getting the bump up to AAA. So we'll get to see him for Memphis sooner rather than later. And I'll have a story coming for STLSportsCentral.com on Tekoa Roby. My thoughts on sort of the development and how he has benefited from it. He had a really interesting quote on Zoom on Saturday after he was named Minor League Pitcher of the Month that I wanted to make sure to get out there and talk about and write about a little bit. So we'll do that a little bit later on this week. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.